New recruits warming up in Base 7, Doctor.
Human. No combat record at all. This should be over in 10 seconds.
Officer Van Thesk had personally supervised the collapse of 3 recruiting classes, 2 riots, and 1 paperwork incident involving a sentient fungus that ate its own enlistment forms. None of it had prepared him for the woman currently doing jumping jacks in Bay 7. She wasn't nervous. That was the part that scared him. My name is Jess Calloway, and honestly, I almost didn't show up. The flyer outside the community center read multi-species fitness assessment, free protein bars, no experience necessary, and I'd had a long week, and free protein bars are still free protein bars. Some interstellar committee called the Ashvane Concord wanted baseline data from a few dozen species before deciding who got invited into their coalition. I figured it would be like a company health screening, blood pressure cuff, maybe a treadmill. I wore my normal gym clothes, the ones with the coffee stain on the hip I never bothered treating. I brought my own water bottle, mostly out of habit. I stretched my hamstrings while a 9-foot alien in a lab coat explained, very seriously, that today's activity was low-impact orientation sparring. I nodded like I understood what that meant. I did not. There was a waiver form full of fine print about non-standard biology and unforeseen physiological variants, and I signed it the way I sign every waiver, which is to say without reading a single word of it, because I was mostly wondering whether the protein bars came in chocolate. The first recruit they sent in was named Doris, a promising young Catherine with excellent marks in unarmed combat. Thesk watched the monitor as Jess Calloway tapped Doris once, almost apologetically, on the shoulder.
Doris sat down.
Not fell, sat, the way someone decides a floor looks comfortable and commits to the decision. Recalibrate the pressure sensors, Thesk told his aide, Corvin. Something's reading wrong. Corvin recalibrated them twice. They read the same. Dr. Illerwen ran the bioscan twice, because the first result seemed like an equipment fault. Human subject's resting heart rate, 68 beats per minute, well within the species' normal range. She checked the timestamp. The scan had been taken 4 seconds after the subject dropped a 200-pound recruit onto the mat. Wynne stared at the number for a long moment, then typed, awaiting clarification into the notes field, because she genuinely did not know what else to write. What clarification exactly would help? By recruit number 12, Thesk had quietly stopped announcing scores over the intercom, because the scores had stopped making sense to anyone listening. Jess Calloway was chatting with the recruit handling staff between rounds about a television show she liked. She apologized to Recruit 14 for probably bruising him a little. Recruit 14 required medical assistance to leave the mat unassisted. Is she? Corvin hesitated, glancing at Thesk. Is she doing this on purpose? Thesk didn't answer right away. He'd started timing each round with his own internal clock, and the numbers kept trending in a direction he didn't have a word for yet.
Not fast.
Unbothered. Somehow that was worse. Pull Recruit 20 and give her a rest cycle, Thesk finally said. Corvin pointed out, gently, that it was the recruits who kept needing rest cycles, not the human. Thesk had no response to that either. Commander Vhalak did not typically monitor Base 7 personally, but her assistant had pulled her into the observation gallery with the words, "You need to see this," which was not a sentence usually applied to jumping jacks. On the screen, a recruit counter read 40. Vhalak watched Jess Calloway wave off an offered water break, saying she was barely warmed up yet. Pull the equipment logs, Vhalak said flatly. I want to know if those recruit drones are malfunctioning, because I refuse to accept that this is simply what's happening. The equipment was not malfunctioning. When second, deeper scan revealed something considerably worse. Jess Calloway's biometric output had not approached any known physiological ceiling for her species. Her measured exertion was consistent with someone doing light housework. Every recruit she'd faced across 40 rounds had been operating at competitive maximum. Wen's best estimate put the human at roughly 9% effort. She read the figure 4 times before she made herself say it aloud to the gallery. She's not trying, Wen said. She isn't even close to trying, and she has apologized to 11 separate people for it. For context, Wen added, the Concord's top-rated combat specialist peaked at 94% output during championship trials and had needed 3 days of recovery afterward. Jess Calloway looked like she needed a snack. Vhalak pulled Jess Calloway's file next, expecting a soldier's record, or at minimum an athlete's. She found a dental hygienist from a town whose name translated, roughly, to place near the river. No military service. No combat training of any kind. No notable athletic history, aside from a single line noting she had once finished a community 5-kilometer race, somewhere in the middle of the pack. Vhalak set the file down very slowly, the way one sets down something that might still be armed. This was the Concord's standard entry-level aptitude test, the easy one, calibrated to filter out only the weakest 15% of any applying species. It was designed, by every metric the Concord had ever used, to be unremarkable. If this is what an untrained, unaffiliated civilian does while distracted and apologizing, Vhalak said quietly, I do not want to be in the room when one of them is actually paying attention. She thought, briefly, about the Concord's actual soldiers waiting back on Earth's homeworld, the ones who presumably had trained for this sort of thing on purpose, and decided she did not want to think about that anymore either. I finished Recruit 60 a little out of breath, mostly because the bay was warm and I'd forgotten to bring a second water bottle. Everyone up on the observation deck had gone very quiet, which I figured meant I'd broken some rule. Maybe you weren't supposed to give the recruits a thumbs up afterward. I gave number 60 one anyway. He did not give one back. I wiped my forehead, looked around at all these tall, pale-eyed officials staring at me like I'd grown a second head mid-round, and asked the nearest one the only question actually on my mind. Hey, so, when does the real training start? This was a nice warm-up, but I signed up for the full assessment. Nobody answered me for what felt like a genuinely uncomfortable amount of time. Somewhere behind the glass, I heard someone whisper something that sounded a lot like a prayer. I assumed it was about the schedule running long. Later, I found out the orientation sparring had been the entire assessment. I also found out, from a very polite committee that suddenly needed several more administrative cycles to process my paperwork, that the Concord had quietly pulled humanities application from the coalition agenda pending further internal review. Whatever that means, I still got my protein bars, for the record. Apparently, that part's non-negotiable once it's promised, interstellar committee or not. Vhalak, I'm told, spent the rest of that day drafting a memo that reportedly took her 4 separate attempts to phrase without sounding like she was panicking. When kept the biometric printout, apparently for her own records, though I heard secondhand that she'd also started sleeping with the observation deck's alarm system turned all the way up. Corvin asked, off the record, whether Earth had a professional league for this sort of thing, and nobody in the building could figure out how to answer him honestly. Thesk, for his part, requested a transfer to records management. I don't blame him. Base 7 looked like it needed a long break from all of us. Anyway, I've been back at my regular Tuesday gym class since then, and it genuinely feels harder than Base 7 ever did. Coach Marcia does not go easy on burpees, and frankly I respect her more for it. Somewhere in a Concord archive, a report now exists titled, Recommendation. Do not proceed until species can confirm whether subject was their strongest or weakest citizen. Nobody has volunteered to find out which. Nobody has volunteered to ask me, either, which is a shame, because I'd have told them. I'm pretty sure I'm just average.